So the Constitution, you can say, is 4 different boxes. So you have ideals, which we just read. You have structures, which you can also just call it processes. Powers and rights or liberties. So maybe these are categories of questions. The ideal is the why are we doing this? That's the preamble. What's the structure question? How? Good. What's the powers question?
Who gets to do what?
Who? Good. And what?
To
To whom? So what are the rights and liberties questions? It's both.
What
Right.
can't they do?
Right.
it's kind of wine.
It's the anti-power.
Right.
So a lot of people don't normally think about it this way, but the absence of power is itself a protection. And more specifically, a written liberty or a written right is the constraint of power. So these two go together. But again, ideals, structures, processes, those are the same. I would say these are the same thing, but you'll see what I mean when I put them somewhat differently. Powers and rights. Okay, so when you read the Constitution for the first time, you might not see until you're done, which could take a long time, which of these gets the most attention in the Constitution. And I mean the first 7 articles, Articles 1 through 7. And then, of course, the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, and then you have 17 other amendments. But in the body of the Constitution, one of these is dominant in the number of words and clauses. What does the Constitution spend more time on than anything else?
Powers.
Structure.
Yeah, structures. And then, I'll put this in the small powers, but structure wins, actually. And that makes it so interesting. Why is structure the most important thing to do then?
It's how they're setting up the
How?
government.
So tell me your name.
Mike.
Michael. So why would you care, if you're setting up a constitution, why would you spend so much time creating the 3 branches, creating the mechanisms of election, creating lawmaking, Jay?
Because the Articles of Confederation had no structure.
Right.
And it was very unsuccessful.
Well, it had, we'll get to that next. It had it had a very, a deceptively simple structure,
Right.
which made it deceptively easy, but of course it wasn't. They have a harder structure with the purpose of doing more things. So it's a strange dilemma, but let's get to this. So I want to spend about a half an hour on each of these. So in the next few minutes, we'll just zip through this, but we'll keep it there. Let's look at Article 1. This is the congressional article. And famously, there are sections about power. But let's look here. So let's just say, this is just an example of how structure-oriented the Constitution is. But you're right, powers are the next most numerous part. So, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every 2nd year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. What that means, well, there are 2 things here. One is that the whole House of Representatives is up every 2 years. The entire House. And states control voting rights. And states still have a lot of control over voting rights. Not total control, not as much as then. But for example, states can still give some carving out of exclusion. As you may know, being a convicted felon means you might lose your voting rights temporarily or permanently. That's up to the state. How you get it back after you served your time, that's a state question. Another state question is how many days before the election do you have to register? Some states you walk on the same day. I was deceived by that because I went to the University of Wisconsin, and Wisconsin has same-day registration. I didn't know that, I'd never voted before. I wandered from my dorm on an election day. What election was it? I tell my students so they'll know how old I am, but then they have to think about it for a while. It was Dukakis Bush, okay? That stuns them right there. They weren't born yet, so, let alone when your students were born, I don't even want to know. So the point here is that I didn't know that most states had registration deadlines, because I just walked in and registered to vote in Wisconsin. But that's actually very rare. Okay, so next, no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years, been 7 years a citizen, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state. And then, now this is the biggest question for the House, you know this from the Constitutional Convention. Why is the issue of slavery more important for the apportionment of the House and the Senate? This does not exist in the Senate part, it doesn't need to.
Population.
Right, it's population. The Senate, it doesn't matter how many slaves are in a state for the purposes of the Senate. Every state is equal. But for the House, who wanted to count slaves as full people? The South. And so which is the exact opposite of what you might think. But of course the North didn't want any Southern slave to be counted for apportionment because that would give the slave-holding states too much power, not only in the House election, but in another election that is partly dictated by House numbers. What's the other election? Where else does it matter how many House seats you have? Presidential election, right, because of the Electoral College. So, of course, the famous and 3/5 clause is here. In any constitution, it's going to be underlined or italicized because, of course, the 13th Amendment destroys the need for this. The Constitution is never actually X'd out. The amendments, though, are usually shown in the text. So, let's go on a little bit faster. I'm just going to show you one more thing. And then we'll take, well, not a break yet, but we'll go on to the next section. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature. Most people don't know this. So why did the Constitution say that senators should be chosen by the state legislature? So it will be chosen by Frankfurt in Kentucky, not by voters.
Because it was the upper house and a
A little more what? Well, that,
Removed from the common people.
okay, removed from the common people. Remember what I said earlier about who got to vote then?
Yeah.
This is a really strange theme about the Federalists who wrote the Constitution. They're not just afraid of the rabble, no offense, the excluded people. They're actually afraid of the people who do vote, who were qualified. They were afraid of voters, the voters who were 5 to 10% of the population. They didn't trust them to choose the senators. They wanted the state legislators to do it because that would create a filtration system. So ideally, bad candidates would be filtered through, but then what happened over the next 130 years? Eventually, this was changed.
Direct election.
We have direct election today. Does anybody want to show off?
19.
What was that?
19.
19, close. 17, good.
Is that,
In 1913.
is that similar though to our electoral college now? And the fact that,
No, the electoral college is still there, strangely enough.
no, I know it's
Oh.
there, I'm saying, is this like a present day
Yes.
reminder of this?
Yes, I mean, we could by amendment abolish the electoral college. We could also do it in a much easier way,
Which has been talked about.
which is just done at the state level.
Yeah,
Because every state determines how their electors are allocated. So the fact that, and I'll show you some electoral maps in a minute, but if Kentucky or any other state wanted to say by state law that the state will follow the exact proportion
Which,
of the popular vote,
Mhm.
which Maine and Nebraska did. So did, for example, Barack Obama win any congressional districts in 2008 in Kentucky? Now, obviously, it's a red state by majority, but Obama won the county and the district of Louisville and the district of Lexington. So would he have gotten any electoral votes if we had had a proportional system? Yes. Okay, that sounds good if you're a Democrat in Kentucky, but let's make it hard. What if you're a Republican in California? You get nothing either. Would you want California to go that way to proportion? And then the Democrats can count on that 55 electoral vote, 55. So Republicans have a bad position in California, as do Democrats in Kentucky. It's not even, we only have 8 and they have 55. But the point is, if every state did it, would it mess up what we currently know about presidential elections? Yes, and instead of concentrating in 9 states, they would have to get every vote, which might be very good,
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
but would also be
Ohio would be
very,
nice.
right, would be, so you would actually, every vote would count in Ohio then. It wouldn't just go one way or the other. State legislatures are not quite sure what to do with these types of proposals because places like Colorado that have debated it, they can't figure out who's gonna win by changing it. But anyway, yes, but it's the same idea. So